want to spend some time with Joyce Bawah. She's a spokesperson for the NDC flag bearer, John Mahama. She doesn't come through here very often, so today that she's here, we'll try and get as much out of her as we can before she goes. And of course, she was a former Deputy Minister of Transport during former President Mahama's tenure. She's a lawyer from Holborn College. That's where she had her Bachelor of Law degree. And of course, we're excited to have her. So, well, the president, the former president, is busy. He's hitting the streets, he's talking to Ghanaians, and he's not shying away from voicing the opinion of, well, his party. The most recent thing we've heard him on is the posture of the EC chair, where he was quite clear that him and his party don't trust the EC chair. Surely, we can't hold an election when one party, one of the major parties, doesn't trust the institution that will hold the election.
Well, good morning, Kojo. And as you said, it's been a while. Thanks for having me this morning. And thank you very much. You know, first and foremost, President Mahama is fine. He's currently in Malawi leading the African Union team of observers to the elections there in Malawi. I recall that a few days ago, we all listened to the interview which was granted to City FM by President Mahama. I think that he was pretty straightforward. He expressed some very succinct views about some key issues pertaining to governance, largely on a whole gamut of issues. He spoke extensively about the spirit of insecurity in the country. He touched on matters to do with his successor and his comments about his predecessors, you know, projects in the country. He also spoke extensively about current issues pertaining to the Electoral Commission and matters thereon. I would like to indicate that President Mahama was very, very clear in his thoughts about the posture, the posturing, the attitude, the hostile relationship between the EC as a body or commission and, of course, persons that they are supposed to be acting as arbiters for. I do believe that you recall stories about recent events at IPAC, which is the inter-party committee that normally engages the EC from time to time on matters that bother on the country's elections. Remember that elections generally give cause for enormous worry and unrest. They also generate enormous tension in the country, and all well-meaning Ghanaians would normally want to see an electoral commission that acts friendly, that acts very accommodating, that is tolerant, especially of the divergent views of specifically the minority, in this case, other political parties other than the political party that is currently in government. I'm sure you would look back at the historical antecedents of the IPAC and, of course, the Electoral Commission. You know, sometimes I think we forget very quickly. We all recall the appointment then of Madame Charlotte Osei. Note that the Constitution of 1992 enjoins any president at any given time to act on the advice of the Council of State in the appointment of any individual who will be considered for the position of EC chairperson. Prior to the last appointment of Madame Charlotte Osei, we had the Mr. Afarijan, who had been there for most of our lives growing up, right from 1996, all through the Fourth Republic largely. The change was occasioned by Dr. Afarijan's imminent retirement from that august position. So then the mantle fell on Madame Charlotte Osei. As a country, and the fact that at the time, Charlotte Osei was one of the very first females to occupy that very, very uncomfortable seat, I think that all that we required was first and foremost for the country to give her the support that she required. But I remember at the time, the then New Patriotic Party, now in government, led by President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, gave government a very tough time. They gave Charlotte a raw deal, practically harangued, harassed, and demeaned and belittled the appointment right through up until the elections of 2016, which they were a judge winners of. You would have expected that in the aftermath, some efforts were made at least to reach out to the Electoral Commission to work out on whatever issues were outstanding, but at least to allow the status quo to be maintained. But through to the promises that were made in opposition, Charlotte Osei was basically fired, dismissed, partly hounded out of that outfit. Naturally, when you look at the historical antecedent, the prelude to the appointment of Madame Jean Mensah, you should expect that there will be some aspects or some members of society, some constituents, some individuals who will definitely not be comfortable with that appointment first and foremost.
So is this revenge?
I would not call it that. I think that Madame Jean Mensah's own posturing, and I borrow the word from President Mahama, since she assumed office, gives enormous cause for concern. I think that the extreme interaction even with the general public personally gives me some discomfort. Sometimes outfits such as this would require a very strong public relations outfit to carry your messages to the public, so that you try as much as possible to reduce friction and needless discourse with the general public. I think that for a few too many times, some of the press conferences, some of the conversations, even led by the EC chair herself, I think have left me relatively quite uncomfortable. Do
you recall some of these things were said about Charlotte Osei?
Oh, unprintable. Well? I would hate to repeat them. I would wish that never happened to any other female in this country. If this had happened in another jurisdiction, some people will be hauled before court. People will be sued for defamation, for malign her hard-won reputation. Go and check Charlotte Osei's record, right from secondary school up until university, and even her record as a professional, as a distinguished individual, and a female at that, makes it even all the more poignant and worrying for our democracy.
So do you reckon that should be the posture of this government? They should consider perhaps suing those who are maligning the new EC chair?
In fact, I don't think the new EC chair has suffered as much as Charlotte did. I'm sure you know that.
Well, I don't
recall any leading members of the National Democratic Congress who have taken a personal fight to Madame Jean Mensah.
Apart from perhaps former President Mahama.
Former President Mahama was not taking it personal. He said the posturing, your attitude, your utterances, your body language.
But he also said he doesn't trust her.
But that's naturally, personal. If your posturing leaves room for concern, any well-meaning member of the opposition, the largest opposition party, the party that has won the most elections under the Fourth Republic, will leave cause for worry. You know, the body of the Electoral Commissioner, even your body language, how you communicate even to other political parties, is what will actually set you apart from the rest. It is what endorses you as this lawful arbiter, this individual that even when the opposition has complaints about the conduct or posturing of governments, they can come to you and expect a fair mediation. I think on this occasion, a little bit of that is lacking. Note also that Madame Jean Osei is actually from the Institute of Jean Mensah is from the Institute of Economic Affairs, a body that has actually acted in Ghana's democracy for a very, very long time. I think there's always been some modicum of friction. There have been some conversations that have taken place in the past, some comments that we pass every now and then. Of course, at the time, who would have thought that one day Madame Jean Mensah would be appointed chair of the Electoral Commission? So I think that even for that alone, there is need for her to actually take a deep breath, think through carefully. It is a very sensitive position, a hotbed of enormous criticism, where you deal with very sensitive matters, that a little bit of any omission, any inaction, even a comment that is not well thought through can easily degenerate into something else. It calls for circumspection. It calls for a certain attitudinal change. It even calls on you to watch your facial expressions like I'm doing this morning. If I were out there having a conversation, I'll probably be more animated. I'll probably have a higher tone. I'll probably have a certain demeanor. But this is a very controlled environment where you believe that you want to make your point in a way that people will understand, they would listen and appreciate the point you're making. The word posturing encapsulates all of this. And I think this is what President Mahama was trying to describe. You recall an interview after the Ayawaso West Wogon, now infamous by-election. And I was very surprised when I heard her say, "Now who calls him?" Repeated 3 times. I didn't expect that someone like her, sitting on this very high pedestal, would be speaking in such balance, Secondly, you recall her issues with the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress. I mean, if General walked in here, he would smile at all of you. I walked in very calmly. That is my persona. That is my personality. I'll be animated if I'm with my friends, if I probably try to lose my guard sometimes. But most often than not, I am a very controlled, very serious person. General is very affable, very friendly, always wears a smile on his face, broadly, at any given time, even under strenuous circumstances. He is the type of person who likes to calm things in calm an environment, always a voice of reason and enormous wisdom. So if General comes up at a meeting and the complaint is that he kept smiling at you and you have issues with it, that is a touch.
I don't think the word was smiling. I think they said laughing.
I think that is a touch personal. You and I were not there. We don't know what. Sometimes, depending on what you're saying, how you were saying it, your body language, people will wonder, do you know the seat that you occupy? Do you understand the enormous responsibility that has been handed over to you? Do you appreciate the tenets of this job that you occupy? That you have the single opportunity to keep Ghana on the path of democracy or to destroy Ghana's democracy. I think when you occupy such a position, you must be very conscious of the burdens that you carry as an individual. I believe that Madame Jean Mensah understands her responsibilities. I believe she must first appreciate that she would always have to deal with dissent, with different opinions, deal with criticisms is normal. But I think all in all, how you rise above it will determine the level of professionalism that you want to attach. And I think in terms of her deputy, it is even worse. Look, I would advise them, if I were asked or if my opinion were sought, to get a public relations officer or a communications officer. They are trained to speak to the public. They would understand the sensitivity of the information they want to communicate. They will appreciate the sensibilities of the general public. And I think they will better communicate their positions so that we allow the position to remain this mythical one, shrouded in some sort. You know, remember that when Dr. Farijan was there, it was very rare to hear his voice. And he had an amazing,
that was a good thing. And I work for the media.
Yes, but you know the times were also different. At a point, if you recall, he had become very engaging at some point. Right in the run-up to the aftermath of 2004. For the first time, he had come out of his shell, was communicating more, etc. Madame Charlotte Osei had a very approachable personality. She engaged the public each time it was required.
She was accused of being arrogant.
Well, I don't recall.
There were comments that she made, which just like the Nahu call some that you take objection to.
And I remember that at the time, she was well criticized as well. And I remember when on one occasion, she apologized if people find her manner a bit too abrupt. It is also leadership. When you admit that maybe you have not engaged your core stakeholders properly, that you have not addressed them within the respect they expect, that you have engaged them on certain matters. And remember that in this particular impasse that occurred, they had actually come out and admitted that yes, they had not tied up on the agreements that were reached, that there was a need for them to go and come back and finish up. But then again, they had come out with a certain communique, which was withdrawn. These things would happen. Each time there's a new leadership, it will take a while for things to settle. I think
so you should be the first to understand some of these things that Madame Jean Mensah is going through.
I think that genuinely, like Charlotte, she should admit that her posturing so far has not been pleasing to the main opposition party.
But
there's nothing wrong with you taking a second look. And especially their public engagements, the language, the choice of words, the tone, the approach. I think that they need either some training on how to approach the public, or they would require a public relations outfit.
What your flag bearer said, though, is that he doesn't trust.
I'm sure if you ask every member of the National Democratic Congress, some issues have come up in recent times that leaves a lot to be desired.
So the question is, if you don't trust this person who has, like you said, the singular opportunity to either keep us on the democratic path or derail us, if you don't trust the EC, how do you even participate in an election?
We didn't trust the EC when the New Patriotic Party was in opposition, but the results were declared for the New Patriotic Party.
Who didn't trust the EC?
Have you forgotten the spats?
No, I'm asking, you said we didn't trust the EC, so I'm asking, who's we?
The then opposition, the New Patriotic Party.
Right, okay. They didn't trust
They didn't. He communicated it in so many ways.
Yeah, so the point I'm making is this. How do you actually do it? How do you say to yourself, I don't trust this person. I think they will not work in my interest, but I'm still going to participate in the process?
First and foremost, when you make these pronouncements, as the main actor, I think the first point of call was for you to do some self-introspection. If there's any little truth, any ambit of fact, that you would check yourself and sit properly. Secondly, as an opposition party, you would keep the EC on its toes. You would investigate, you would question, you would criticize, you would actually look closer at your engagement with them. And as a political party, you will prepare adequately. Prepare your electoral division of your party, prepare the voters' minds, prepare your political party representatives across the country. You will also work hard to ensure that when results are declared, you have worked hard enough for the good people of Ghana to vote massively for you.
So that means when you say you don't trust her, you mean you don't trust, you believe she might, what, rig the election?
Let me tell you something. We use these words very loosely. If I say I do not trust somebody and I've given you a reason, that is because of the person's posturing, because of the posturing of the outfit, I think that is a very clear statement. There are no ambiguities here. It is something that is a matter of fact because there have been various issues that have been publicly documented that we all have come to appreciate. And I would think that if I were in Madame Jean Mensah's shoes, I would simply take it as advice and I'll sit up. And Jean Mensah is everybody's friend.
Yeah. So again, what I'm asking is, if you say you don't trust her, it means you believe she might do what exactly?
Well, who knows what she will do? Maybe presently, even at IPAC, she probably will pander more to the New Patriotic Party, that is the government of the day. She probably will take more instructions from the president and his vice president and persons within government, that maybe she would actually pander more to them, because we've also heard that Madame Jean Mensah has a very strong, close, familial relationship with persons currently in government. These are all matters for concern. You know, issues to do with prejudice and biases are usually very thin. They're not matters that are very clear-cut. And in fact, they cut through or permeate even an individual's professionalism.
Do you think she might rig the elections?
Who personally rigs elections? When you listen to the stories from the United States of America about hacking into the system, I don't think that it is about the individual president or the then candidates who were doing that. But you have artificial intelligence now, and all sorts of things happen. If you recall, even in 2016, there was a point at which the Electoral Commission had to stop transmission because they believed that the system had been hacked by some unscrupulous persons. These things are not things that are within anybody's remit or purview. As we sit here, I'm sure there are persons who are probably listening on all your activities here, and unbeknown to you. So these are real and clear and present dangers.
So that's a yes.
Advanced information technological issues must allow us to start to think about and grapple with. And I believe you heard Madame Jean Mensah yesterday when she admitted that the data of the whole of the Electoral Commission was in the hands of foreigners. I don't know whether she meant that there was some suspicion or that she wasn't comfortable with it. But if there are competent Ghanaian companies that can still give you the similar database, a similar service, why don't you advertise and engage them? There's nothing wrong. President Mahama deliberately did not go as far as you were saying, but he mentioned Madame Jean Mensah's posturing.
Right.
And I think it is something that we have all observed. I respect Madame Jean Mensah.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking specifically about rigging is because she spoke about that when she was asked about what former President Mahama said. Let's watch what Madame Jean Mensah said.
This is where we really need you to go with us along the way, because we are really ready. We are here to ensure that it is the will of the people that stands. We are not here to plunge this nation into war. And anybody, I mean, that's the only way. You cannot rig the election for anybody. The EC cannot. Even at the polling stations, you have your officials there. You parties must make sure that these are credible agents that they have who can be trusted, and they should be able to be trained to, you know, take records of the results and so on. But the EC cannot, unless the EC wants to plunge this nation glaringly into war. It cannot happen. Right from the start to the finishing line, The processes are watertight, they are transparent, and we're looking to work with our partners, the media, the political parties, to identify, along the line, if there are some loopholes. These things should be unearthed so that together with the parties and civil society, the media and so on, we can plug those holes and tighten the screws.
Yeah, that was Mrs. Jean Mensah speaking when she visited multimedia on a courtesy call. So yeah, that's how she responds to
I would
your
personally
mistrust.
have expected her also to acknowledge the fact that there could also be hacking into the system, albeit not rigging.
You mean like Madam Charlotte Osei told us the system was hacked?
Or like what happened in the United States of America and it's still being investigated. Or like what happened in the United Kingdom.
Well, that was not hacking. What they believed was that there was influence.
But all types of it. Hacking came up, rigging came up, all sorts of nomenclature has been used. And as I said, there's no clear-cut description or definition. It just tells you that our technologies have advanced and you've listened to stories about these individuals who actually undertake these responsibilities and obligations, and they tell you how they go about it, how they are able to infiltrate a system through technology, how they are able to get information even through technology, and be known even to the key actors and players or stakeholders for that matter. Yeah. As I said, I would have expected an EC chair to admit to challenges even with IT that are clear and modern day issues that we now have to grapple with, that we didn't have to grapple with before. So it means that your spy walls, your systems must be very, very firmly protected. And I recall when Kenya recently, there was a similar story.
Yeah.
And they had to stop and start doing the counting manually. It happened here in Ghana. Maybe we haven't attached any extreme seriousness to it because there were other checks and balances that were put in place. But these are matters that new reforms must take cognizance of. That the EC must take very serious views of these matters.
You've made
and
the
your
point.
posturing must reflect an habitus posturing.
Okay, so you've made these points. But what I'm interested in is that the examples you raise are of sort of external influence, and she was answering the question of whether the EC would do anything to favor one party over the other. You are talking about external influence, which is a possibility everywhere, like you have also highlighted.
You remember?
So is that a reason for former President Mahama not to trust?
On any given day, you recall that in Kenya, for example, there was even an EC official who was abducted. And unfortunately, when he was found, he had been murdered. People take very serious view of these things. Remember that even the work of a hacker, any unscrupulous person, any form of artificial intelligence that will be utilized, you will need a certain human collaboration. You will need somebody to have been compromised in one environment or the other. As I said, these are very, very clear challenges, modern day issues that any electoral commission would have to grapple with.
Okay, we could talk about the EC alone all morning if we were given the opportunity. But
I think that the posturing is still something that we need to take very seriously.
Okay, it's a point you've made several times this morning, and it's well noted. I want us to talk about something else. Recently, the NCA moved in to, in their words, enforce the law. They shut down some radio stations. Two of those stations that were shut down were Radio Gold and Radio XYZ. It happened at a time when they were broadcasting an event that was happening at the NDC headquarters. Just yesterday, there was a demonstration by people seeking to have these stations reopened, if you will. And some members of the NDC joined in that demonstration. Clearly, because these are two stations that in the past have been, well, they've not made a secret of the fact that they are pro-NDC stations. Now, the conversation from the NDC following this has gone to freedom of the press, and that they see this as a violation of that, especially at a time when Ghana is not performing very well in that area globally. Now, I've wanted to ask our friends in the NDC, at what point, let me frame it properly, we do have laws, and freedoms come with responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is you obey the law, you operate within regulation. So if the regulator, following your breach of regulation, shuts you down, how do you leap from that to stifling press freedom? If you don't meet the obligation of having that freedom, it must be taken away from you, mustn't it?
Well, thank you, Kojo. I think that this is a matter that has actually largely played out in the public domain. I think that there's also a prelude to this conversation. I think that we all have to admit that in the 1992 Constitution, specifically Chapter 12, a whole chapter is dedicated to media and press freedoms. Indeed, the press will pride itself as the fourth realm of the estate. That you have certain rights, you have certain access, you have some ability to question and investigate matters that ordinarily people cannot. The best part is that you have every right to print what most people do not see or hear, so that at least you are disseminating information to the general citizenry in its entirety. In this undertaking, there must be no unfettered or deliberate feather on access to information, on your ability to undertake your duties responsibly, especially where it's not fake news and it's not personally to malign or defame any individual's character, where you have cross-checked your story and felt that you have a certain authentic outlook, you are ready to publish. Speak to it in whatever mode you choose to disseminate it. Recall also that the 1992 Constitution took into cognizance the fact that prior to that, the airwaves were largely controlled. There was therefore a shift to create this pluralism that we are all enjoying now. It therefore behoves on any other institution, such as the NCA, whose act, whose establishment arrives way after the promulgation of the 1992 Constitution, to take largely from the leaves and tenets of the Constitution in all of its activities and actions, even in its omissions. Remember that even where radio stations have, prior to all of this, been issued with licenses to operate, where they have been in default, where they have failed to meet certain key regulatory aspects, what stops the NCA from inviting them to engage them? What stops the NCA from writing to them to make do on their promises? What stops the NCA from following up? Look, you can even ask them to stagger the payments. The law will not disallow any individual radio station that comes to say to you, look, all these fines are too hefty. It's because, look, first and foremost, it should start with an audit. Check their books. You see, there's something we refuse to speak to sometimes. And I'm sure if you go to Radio Gold and you go to Radio XYZ, this extreme political polarization that we all experience is affecting their business as well, in the types of business they get. I have even known that Radio Gold reporters have not been invited even to some government media engagements. It's a matter of public record. If you speak to the Media Foundation for West Africa, they will tell you that these things are not right. Everywhere in this world, we have pro-government, pro-opposition, all of that. Remember that most radio stations were born out in Ghana on the days when the revolution was in place. They became a voice for freedom, a voice for democracy, advocates for democracy. That is why we are where we are today. President Jerry John Rawlings, in his wisdom, realized there was a need, especially after his rumpus with the radio eye issues led by Dr. Weku Brobe, to liberalize the airwaves. It is what we are enjoying today. Born out of a revolution, took us into a democracy. Today, that democracy, the Fourth Republic, is the longest that Ghana has had of an uninterrupted intervention in its democratic journey. Nascent as our democracy is, it is built on these media freedoms. I joined the protest. I joined the protest because I believe that even if multimedia were to run into debt, were to go bankrupt, I don't see why your media house should be shut down. You should be allowed to continue to work. You should be given every opportunity to make do on whatever debts you owe or fines
When
outstanding.
companies go bankrupt, they do shut down. That's.
But look at, they even give them a lifeline. In recent times, the Bank of Ghana has actually doled out monies to ensure companies survive. They have done amalgamations.
Banks might enjoy that privilege for a reason,
more than
because of their
anything,
impact
the
on the
greatest
economy.
privilege should be reserved for media freedoms, because it is a privilege on which we all thrive. I feel very strongly about this subject because you see, even fines. Remember that in those days, when we still had the criminal libel law, there were times when an individual has sued for libel, and the amount, the damages have been reduced because it was believed that higher damages would destroy the press house or the media house. There is a good reason. If you go and read the very leading Supreme Court decisions that dictate that punitive or extra large damages being slapped on media houses would actually kill their businesses and muzzle them and gag them and prevent them from speaking truth.
So is it your position that these two stations in particular, Radio Gold, XYZ, they couldn't afford to obey the law? They couldn't afford
on May
pay
9th, and I believe that the general public has called for the National Communications Authority to do the needful, publish a list, good standing, of all radio stations or media houses in Ghana. Let us see it. When you go to their website, there are about 30 or so that are in similar situations. On May 9th, when they drove to the offices of Radio Gold and XYZ, in fact, knowing very well that these are pro-opposition media houses, I, in the seats of the NCA, would have approached it differently. I would probably not have sent my staff with police or military to that place. I would have invited the chief executives of both companies to engage them on the best way forward. And this, I believe, would have been to enhance media freedoms, to encourage even more transparency, above all, to give vent to what the Constitution has given to the media generally.
You're answering a different question, though. I mean, what I'm asking is, is it because they couldn't afford to obey the law?
I started by telling you that you could even go and audit their books. If
So
it
that's
is
a
a case
yes.
that they are, no.
Okay,
If it's a case that they are unable to afford, because I would not know. I did not work in the administration of Radio Gold or XYZ. XYZ in particular was an old frequency that was rebranded and then acquired by another company.
Yeah.
So that one we also know. I don't know the historical antecedent of what they have or what they do not have. I don't think this is a question, or this is a question that should bother on affordability.
Well,
it is why I gave you an example that where punitive damages have been requested by an individual who has been libeled, whose reputation has been damaged by a press house, the first thing a court will give thoughts to is what damage that punitive fine, that punitive order would have on media freedom.
But that is a matter of affordability. Even this example you gave.
It cannot be a matter of affordability.
I actually thought that would have been a pretty good argument for reviewing the law.
We don't want even to reduce it to affordability. Let's take, for example, that there are mushroom radio stations. Remember, there was a good reason why the Constitution even allowed for community-based radio stations. How much money do those community-based radio stations have?
Again, affordability.
But at least they are able to disseminate information in real time.
Again, affordability.
I would not, you see, let's not reduce the debate to a question of money or affordability. Let's focus on the fact that any attempt to fine, to enforce fines on any type of media is actually amounting or tantamount to gagging media freedoms. That is how I see it.
Okay.
And I believe that when you read the outcome of the suit that was filed by the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association at the Electronic Tribunal, it is very clear that the NCA was actually heavy-handed, that the NCA should go back and take a relook at its regulation and enforce it in a manner that is able to be implementable. Remember that even today, an individual can still go to court and argue that the fines as stipulated by the NCA Act are punitive, and that radio or media houses or press freedoms will be gagged because of these fines or hefty fines.
For me, that's still affordability, but I don't
like the word you are using. Maybe the nomenclature is different, but I believe that anything that punishes you punitively through your pocket, the penultimate thing is that they are trying somehow to prevent you from speaking out.
All right. We've got a couple more things I want us to touch on. My producer is asking me to talk about state of security, but I want to keep that for last. I want us to talk first about the Office of the Special Prosecutor. He's made the headlines recently because there was a lot of pressure, people were wondering what's going on, what's the situation with the cases. And then JoyNews was able to put out some information about some cases that they were interested in. And there were some interesting names involved there. Former president was being looked into for some diverted 13 million, according to the OSP's documents. And the former president was the, if you like, the respondent for that case. Now, Mr. Amidu himself had written in the past about this, and then somebody petitioned his office to look into this same matter. How is your boss reacting to this?
Well, thank you very much. I believe that we all saw that particular news item. I think that since then, the Office of the Special Prosecutor has distanced itself from the list as it was published then.
We have to correct that. So the board chair is the person who has spoken on this.
I recall, yeah.
And what she has said, because I was there when she said it, is that if the office were to issue a list, it wouldn't be that one.
Exactly.
They
But
wouldn't put out that amount of information.
Such. Yes.
Yes. However,
yeah,
that list is authentic.
I recall.
That's my addition there.
Your addition.
Yeah.
So secondly, I recall that they had also come to distance themselves from the said list as was circulated, and I watched how you tried to push her very hard to give you a response like you are doing now. So I remember that as well. But be that as it may, I recall that Mr. Martin Amidu himself, then in his cloak as citizen vigilante, had written extensively on this matter. At his very public vetting, when he was asked directly to substantiate that accusation, he had then said that it was a perception he had held at the time because of some information that he was seized with. You see, I come back to the same point that I made when we spoke about the EC. When people employ you, engage you into certain public, very sensitive positions, they expect you to handle those responsibilities with a certain obligation erga omnes, a certain modicum of circumspection, a certain level of tolerance, a certain mediatory and conciliatory approach. The Office of a Special Prosecutor should be shrouded in some myth, some secrecy.
You think so?
No,
not
wait.
Rather transparency?
Let me finish. In some secrecy, because first and foremost, if I decide to go there, for example, to petition, I could go there under the cloak of darkness. I could ask for my identity to be kept secret. I could request for anonymity. I could request that my identity should never be made public. It is in my right so to do. I do not expect that then to be violated or to be abused or to be totally disrespected. Secondly, if they petition the Office of the Special Prosecutor and an individual such as a former president, a distinguished individual of society, a leader of the society is mentioned, I, in the seat of the office, would write formally even that I have received or I am in receipt of such a petition, just as a way of informing or updating the office of President John Dramani Mahama. Secondly, I would expect that you would conduct an investigation timeously because you understand the exigency of the day, that once a name such as this has been mentioned, it would actually generate enormous discomfort and disquiet. But I will also remember that at his vetting, where it mattered most, the Honorable Martin Amidu refused to admit to the said publication and actually described it as a perception that was within the public domain at the time, and he sought to harness the public thoughts and sentiments by putting that in his article. In any case, the company they speak of is a publicly listed company. I am sure if there had any cause or concern, they would have probably come out blazing. How, in any case, do you think that a president, a vice president, or even a minister has any way of influencing a transfer of shares? The Registrar General is there. I'm sure if you go there, you can find the shareholders list. You would find who the shareholders are. In fact, the law allows you to pierce the veil of incorporation and find out who the individuals shareholders are in that company. And these are very easy. The Honorable McNamee is the most senior advocate of the Supreme Court of Ghana. Even if we are close to 20 years at the bar, we are nowhere near them. They are fathers of the law, repositories of everything that is justice. He knows a lot more than I would ever be able to espouse. And he knows that where an unsubstantiated allegation has been made about the person of a man of the stature of John Dramani Mahama, that some seriousness should be attached to it. But this sort of propagandist thing that we've reduced the office to is needless. In any case, I've heard the whole rampos this week about the accusations about somebody within the Office of Special Prosecutor leaking information and all of that. If you run the sort of institution that I expect the Honorable McNamee to be running, he wouldn't have any staff even who would be interested in leaking stories. What would be their interest? Why would they want to do that? I thought he was a repository of everything virtuous, that everybody he employs will emulate his good example and stay above board and act in the utmost good faith that that office requires. I think on this occasion, the office has failed to meet our expectations, that the whole brouhaha that greeted his appointment, I think is woefully overstated, and something needs to be done, and done very quickly. In any case, President Mahama is an individual. And when you make such an allegation, you see, there's no flesh to it, there's no meat to it, there's even no evidence to it. You know, even if you were to decide to go and sue, who would you be suing? A statutory body? For what? What would you be asking for? In any case, they said the story was leaked. So who is responsible for the leak? It might not even be the individual who has been made a scapegoat. Maybe the office is just trying to save face. You see, when we work and work properly, effectively, impactfully, and with the utmost good faith, the sort of fiduciary responsibility that is embedded in us within that office and the oath of that office will enjoin you to act in a certain way. In any case, over the years, what has been the Honorable McNamee's posturing towards the individual John Mahama? It's been very hostile, to say the least. It's been negative at best. Most of his most critical writings were against President John Mahama. Are we then saying, Kojo, you are in the media, haven't we read stories all over the place about corruption within the New Patriotic Party, led by President Akufo-Addo? We've had the president himself decry dealing with corruption and how difficult it is. We've heard President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo speak to how individuals within his government were submitted to the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, and they've been cleared. If it did not matter to him, I don't think he would speak to it so publicly. I have also heard about the cash for seats question inquiry, which was set up under the auspices of the president himself, and of course with Parliament supervising. There are many stories. The Boston allegations are still ongoing. Even this morning there's an item about Boston in the news. There are many, many types of all forms of corruption. And I'm sure you've seen the corruption index too. Besides the media freedoms one, we have also dropped in that category as well. Is it because the president is not working or fighting to improve upon corruption? He is making every effort. But this is a human canker. It permeates all of our society. But it was this same corruption perception that we used. And in fact, I believe that that is even in the end what made Citizen Vigilante such a popular individual, because he spent all his time trying to expose malfeasance. I think the malfeasance has not reduced. At least if you look at the public perception indexes, it has even become lower. Is it because no effort is being made? A leader is only human and has to work with many people, people that you probably have never even met. You would see their CVs and think, oh, this is a great person for this job. Let's all realize that Ghana is the only country that some of us have. We would go nowhere, we would live nowhere. I have studied in England, I've studied in Malta, I've studied in the United States of America. I still live here, and I will always live here. I've always lived and worked here. Despite all the brief times I've worked in other places, this is still our home. Our democracy is what we have chosen. It is what we are all working to defend. In fact, having opposition governments, parties, strong oppositions in a country is also a test to the strength of your democracy. And I think that we expect that more than anybody, President Nana Akufo-Addo should be calling the Office of the Special Prosecutor to order. I don't think that if the president found himself in a similar situation, he would take sit kindly And I believe that President Mahama is not either.
So you think they should be called to order over the case against former President Mahama?
Publishing a list, publish it. You are investigating, tell us where you are. You should even write out of respect.
There are other cases on that list involving members of the NDC. Felix Kwachiofosu was mentioned there as a respondent in a case regarding some small, and I'm quoting the title of the case file title, of some small NDC member being given 3 million for some 2 mansions. There's also Mahama Yarga, who is named in about 5 cases, and at least 1 obstruction case as well. Two of the cases that the office has so far brought to court, in fact the only 2 that we are aware of, involve Mahama Yarga. I wonder, does your party feel the same way about those cases as they do about the one involving former President Mahama?
Why ever not? As I said, are we seeing that over the last 2.5 years there have been no petitions about other corrupt activities under the New Patriotic Party?
But there are.
President Akufo-Addo.
There are
Absolutely.
cases
so why
regarding,
don't you start from there? If I were President Akufo-Addo, and I'm very committed to this fight against corruption, and I have gone to appoint citizen vigilante to act as my special prosecutor. In America, I'm sure you heard about the Mueller investigation. It started off with Donald Trump, with his businesses, with his finances.
So you're saying they should have instructed Mr. Amidu on which case to begin?
Charity begins at home. They don't have to. Mr. Amidu himself is a great adult, as I've told you.
Right, because you said if you were the president. So I was wondering,
No,
I mean, does the president have the power to do that?
No, why? I would even call the special prosecutor and tell him, look, if my people are corrupt, deal with them. Start with the investigations. What's wrong with that? They
That
meet
would
regularly.
be trying to influence the special
I
prosecutor.
totally, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see that. Why?
You think it's okay to influence the special?
You're not telling him how to. No, you are not telling him how to do his job.
But you're telling him.
But you are handing over cases even. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. If I were a president committed to the fight against corruption, I would happily call and ask him, look, I've heard about this boss matter. Please take it seriously. What's wrong with that?
So, well, he has 25 cases, and many of them involve
As I said,
NPP
if I was citizen vigilante and he's my uncle,
he's looking into Bost. He's looking into.
I would start. Charity begins
Freddie
at home.
Blay.
I will start from home. My answer.
So where he starts is what matters.
For me, it will be all about perception, as I say.
Right.
It is how you undertake these things.
It's not about which case he gets evidence in first.
All case be case. What you want is to do your job.
Okay, let's talk about security.
So let's get him doing his job and doing it properly and effectively. And avoid the propaganda that we're seeing, that office has been reduced to.
Okay, let's look at security, the state of security in our nation. It's come up for a lot of criticism. All kinds of things happening. There's a threat from the north through the Salafi jihadists, credible threat which the state is supposed to respond to. We recently did some checks on how security conscious Ghanaians are. We didn't do very well. There's also the issue of these guns that are coming in. The NDC had opportunity to talk about that. The Tadi girls, a big matter that continues to be a headache for their families and for the whole nation. Campaign that we're running here, which continues. The CID boss has unfortunately come up for some criticism regarding how she's handled that as well. I'll take your general comments on that. Perhaps you want to start with the Tadi girls, touch on any other security issues that are of concern to you.
Well, a very, very heart-wrenching matter to do with the kidnapping of the Takrady girls. I believe that government has probably not handled it as effectively as they could have. I think that there could have been regular briefing sessions. There could have been a deeper engagement with the family. But of course, I would also be the first to admit that investigations take all sorts of forms. And sometimes certain types of investigations might even be better off if you keep more information to yourself. Maybe you just invite the family at intermittent times and just update them or apprise them on what you're doing first and foremost. But I think that this is a matter that has generated enormous hubris. People have been most uncomfortable with how the investigation has been handled this far. And I think the utterances of the CID boss herself leave a lot to be desired. I would personally be remiss if I do not join the many voices to condemn those comments that were made. They were insensitive, they were not professional, they are not becoming of an office of that stature. And I think that in future, we should learn to be a little bit more circumspect when we're dealing with such sensitive matters. But talking about security, it started with the gangster-style murder of Ahmed Hussein Swale, an investigative journalist who was working with Tiger Eye, I believe, and whose identity had been, in the run-up to his murder, exposed or, you know, made known to the general public. And there were some taunts and threats by a certain member of parliament, a whole honorable member, and I know he's still around in the system. I haven't even heard that he's assisting in any investigations to do with that gentleman.
He was invited.
Exactly. Well, I don't know what the outcome is. As I said, information flow has been very, very difficult. So it's also like every other thing, not much is out about what transpired, you know. So that is another thing. The third thing is with the spates of, there's a lady in GPHA, the estates manager, lovely woman, a colleague of mine. Because, you know, before I came into government, I'd worked at the Ghana Shippers Authority for over 10 years, who was murdered in cold blood in her home. Until date, we haven't heard that there's been a conclusion of the matter. We have heard about the Edward Ateti situation, where he's had this rumpus with the minister and he's struggling even to preserve his life. We know about what has happened with Manasseh Azuri. It is still a matter that is raging. I heard about a letter yesterday that was actually advising your media house to stop sending him to cover government programs, etc. This infringes media freedoms. It infringes human rights. It borders on a lack
boycotted us
a
as
lack
well.
of security.
Political parties, you treat
as
the media almost the same way.
As for boycotts, there are many very gentlemanly or ladylike ways of putting pressure or bringing pressure to bear on media houses. So there's absolutely nothing wrong.
My heart.
Absolutely.
There was nothing gentlemanly about
it's
your
like
boycott of the NDC.
It's like going for arbitration. You must all live with something. There are always parts, naturally. And I'm sure it's not in doubt that today, even the information minister, who was your former staff, has boycotted your station. Naturally, these things happen.
Just like you did. You even announced it to the world.
I was never a staff of multimedia.
Your party.
And I don't recall our information minister being a staff either. But yes, there's a worrying development about security. It's something that bothers Ghanaians. You know, in all the research that I have seen over the last 10 years, the main thing that bothers Ghanaians besides hardship is security, more than any other thing. When you watch what happened in Odumasi Krobo, when you watch how the public citizens are attacking police people, it shows there's also now a certain degeneration in the police-citizen relationship. The respect we used to have for the uniform. There was a video that went viral where people actually spent the time slamming into a policeman. They pulled him to the back of the vehicle and really gave him beatings of his life. We saw what has happened in Odumasi, where the police were even afraid for their lives. Unfortunate as that attempt to control the crowd has been, and the unfortunate outcome, it tells you that there's a breach or there's a breakdown in security. So these are all matters that concern us, and I think the conversation will continue.
Absolutely.
It's something that
it must continue.
Absolutely.
Such a rare pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Give me a good laugh there at the end as well. Joyce Bawah Mukhtari speaks for the flag bearer of the NDC, and we're hoping it won't be too long before she's back with us.
You know I try, but I don't like the little fallouts. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you too.